My name's Ethan Cole, and for most of last year, I was living alone in a small rental house on the edge of Maple Drive in Asheville, North Carolina. It wasn't much, just a one-story, two-bedroom home with a narrow porch and a view of thick woods stretching behind the backyard. But it was quiet, cheap, and only a 10-minute drive from my job as a freelance photographer. I'd moved in after a rough breakup, figuring I needed space and silence to reset. And for a while, that's exactly what I got. Quiet mornings, long walks, late nights editing photos. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until one Friday night in early December. It was cold, the kind of night where the air feels sharp in your lungs. I was curled up on the couch editing a wedding shoot when I heard it. A soft thud from the hallway. Not loud, but heavy enough to cut through the quiet. I paused my music and listened. Nothing. Probably the house settling, I thought. Old wood, old pipes, no big deal. But a few minutes later, it came again. Thud. A little louder this time. "Hello?" I called out, half laughing at myself. I lived alone. Who was I even talking to? The sound came once more, followed by a faint creak, like someone had stepped onto the floorboards just outside my bedroom. I stood up, heart starting to race, and grabbed the flashlight I kept in the kitchen drawer. When I pointed it down the hallway, everything looked normal. The air felt still, but somehow heavy. I checked both bedrooms, the bathroom, even the laundry room. Nothing. No open windows, no signs of anyone breaking in. I told myself I was just tired, turned on every light, and went back to work. By midnight, I'd finished editing and was ready to crash. I brushed my teeth, locked the doors, and double-checked the back door, which had a bad habit of sticking. Everything seemed fine. Until I was halfway up the stairs. Behind me, from the kitchen, I heard a faint click. It was the sound of the back door unlatching. I froze, slowly turned around. The kitchen was dark, just a faint glow from the microwave clock. I whispered, "No way." My brain started listing options. Maybe I forgot to lock it, maybe the wind, maybe the frame's loose. But deep down, I knew that sound too well. Someone had opened that door. I crept back down the stairs, gripping the flashlight tight enough to hurt. The kitchen tiles felt like ice under my feet. I turned the corner and stopped dead. The door was slightly open. Not much, just an inch of darkness showing through the gap. I stood there for what felt like forever, trying to hear anything. Breathing, footsteps, movement, nothing. Finally, I slammed the door shut, locked both the deadbolt and chain, and pushed a chair under the handle. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the flashlight. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat on the couch all night, lights on, waiting for morning. The next day, I installed a motion sensor camera I'd bought online months ago and never used. It sent alerts to my phone whenever it detected movement. For the first few days, nothing. Then, on Wednesday night, around 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected, kitchen. I sat up, hard hammering. I opened the app, and there it was, grainy black and white footage of my kitchen. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then, in the corner near the back door, a shadow shifted. It wasn't the kind of shadow made by headlights or trees. It was darker, thicker, and it moved against the light from the window, not with it. I watched, frozen, as it drifted across the kitchen toward the hallway, toward where I was lying in bed at that exact moment. I didn't even think. I grabbed my keys, bolted out the front door, and sat in my car with the engine running until sunrise. When I went back inside, everything looked untouched. The chair was still against the back door, the locks in place. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. But when I checked the camera app again, the last frame before it shut off showed something I can't explain. A face, pale and expressionless, half hidden behind the kitchen door. I called the police that afternoon. They searched the house, the yard, even the woods behind the fence. Nothing. The officer said it was probably a glitch or some trick of light. I didn't argue. I just nodded and started packing. By the next evening, I'd moved into a friend's apartment across town. I told myself I'd go back later for the rest of my stuff: clothes, tools, a few boxes in the attic. A week passed before I finally did. When I unlocked the door, the air inside was freezing. It smelled different, like damp wood and dust. I walked through each room quickly, checking that everything was still there. It was. But when I got to the attic door, the one I never opened, I noticed something new. The door was cracked open, just enough to see inside. A faint draft came from the darkness. I climbed up slowly, flashlight shaking in my hand. The attic was small, just wooden beams and old insulation. My boxes sat untouched in the corner. And then I saw it. Near the back wall, scratched into the wood with something sharp. I never left. That's when I realized the truth. The thing in that house wasn't trying to break in. It was already there. My name's Lauren Price, and until last spring, I thought I lived in the safest street in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Maplewood Court was one of those quiet cul-de-sacs where kids rode bikes after dinner and neighbors waved from their driveways. I rented a 2-bedroom house at the very end of the lane, small, old, but perfect for me and my dog Cooper. Everything was normal until one night in April. I'd just finished grading papers. It was around 11:30 p.m. when Cooper started growling at the front window. Not barking, just a low, steady rumble that made the hair on my neck stand up. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, crossing the living room. The blinds were down, but when I peeked through them, I saw something strange across the street. A figure standing under the lamppost. They weren't moving, just watching my house. At first, I thought it was one of the teenage boys from down the road, maybe pulling a prank. But the figure was tall, too tall, and completely still. After a minute, I grabbed my phone to take a photo, but by the time I looked again, the street was empty. The next morning, I laughed it off, probably a trick of the light. But that night, around the same time, Cooper growled again. Same lamppost, same figure. This time I could see a little more. They wore something dark, maybe a hoodie, and their head was tilted slightly to the side, like they were curious. I almost called the police, but I didn't have much to tell them. Someone standing on a public street isn't exactly a crime. So instead, I kept the porch light on and tried to sleep. But it happened again and again. Every night around midnight, the figure would appear, always across the street, always facing my house. After the 5th night, I told my next-door neighbor, Tom, about it. He frowned and said he hadn't seen anyone. Maybe some delivery driver parking weird, he suggested. That night, I decided to stay up and record it. I set up my phone in the window and hit record around 11:45 p.m. At 12:06 a.m., the motion light across the street clicked on. The figure was back, watching. When I zoomed in later, the footage made my stomach turn. It wasn't a hoodie, it was a long coat, and under the streetlight, their face looked pale, too pale. I sent the video to the police. An officer came by the next afternoon, looked around, and promised to drive through the area at night, but nothing came of it. That should have been the end of it. Except a few nights later, I woke up at 3 a.m. to Cooper whining at the bedroom door. He never did that. I listened and heard a faint screeping sound coming from outside my window. I crept over and peeked through the blinds. No one was there. But on the glass, faint in the moonlight, I saw smudge marks, long, greasy streaks that looked like fingerprints from the outside. I called the police again. They searched the yard, took a few photos, and told me it might have been condensation or a prank. The officer said they'd keep an eye on it. 2 nights later, my porch light blew out. When I got home from work the next evening, something else was wrong. The welcome mat was missing, and in its place was a piece of folded paper. In shaky handwriting, it said, "I see you too." That was it. No name, no signature. I packed a bag and stayed at Tom's house that night. The next morning, we checked the security footage from his Ring camera. At 2:41 a.m., it showed someone walking down my driveway. The person stopped at my porch, bent down, and stayed perfectly still for almost a full minute. The face was turned toward the camera, but it was too blurry to make out, just a pale oval. Then the figure straightened, stepped backward into the shadows, and vanished. Tom insisted we show the cops again. They reviewed it, filed a report, but said without a clear face or license plate, there wasn't much they could do. I decided to move. It took 2 weeks to find a new apartment across town. During that time, I stayed with my sister. A moving company handled the boxes. I told myself I was done with that house, that neighborhood, and whatever had been haunting my nights. Last week, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past Maplewood Court one last time, just to see the old place before handing in the keys. It looked smaller than I remembered. The grass overgrown, the porch light still broken. As I pulled up, I noticed something new on the front door. Something white taped just above the handle. I parked, walked up cautiously, and realized it was an envelope. My name was written across it in that same shaky handwriting. My hands were trembling when I opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, sleeping, in my new apartment. And on the back, written in black marker, were 3 words. I moved too. My name's Jason Miller, and 3 years ago, I rented a small basement apartment in Columbus, Ohio. It was cheap, quiet, and close enough to my job at the auto shop that I could walk there in 10 minutes. The owner, Mrs. Whitmore, was an older widow who lived upstairs. Sweet lady, though a bit odd. She told me I could use the laundry room, the kitchen when I needed, and to just stay out of the last room down the hall. I thought she meant it was just storage, so I didn't ask questions. The place was furnished, small couch, old TV, a bed that creaked when I breathed, but it worked. The first few weeks were peaceful. I worked, came home, ate dinner, and watched late-night TV before crashing. Then, one night in March, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of footsteps above me. Nothing strange there. Mrs. Whitmore often got up at night. But then I heard something else, a soft tapping noise, like knuckles brushing against the wall beside my bed. Tap, tap, tap. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. The next morning at breakfast, I mentioned it to her. She smiled politely and said, "Old pipes, this house is full of them." I wanted to believe that. But 2 nights later, it happened again. Louder this time, more deliberate. Tap, pause, tap. I pressed my ear to the wall. It sounded like it came from the other side, maybe the hallway, or the last room she told me not to enter. The following day, curiosity got the better of me. While she was out, I walked down that narrow hallway. The air got cooler as I reached the end. The door she'd mentioned was plain white, a little warped, with an old brass knob that didn't match the others. I tried the handle. Locked. When I bent down, I noticed something strange. The faint outline of deep scratches around the knob, like someone had tried to claw it open. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the wall, waiting for the tapping. It didn't come. Instead, around 4 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispering. I froze. It was faint, but it was definitely coming from the hallway. 2 voices, one male, one female, murmuring just out of reach. I got up, grabbed my phone for light, and cracked open my door. The hallway was pitch black. I listened. The whispering stopped instantly, like whoever it was had realized I was awake. Then something else. Soft footsteps padding away toward that last door. The next morning, Mrs. Whitmore acted normal. She even brought me muffins. When I asked if she'd been awake last night, she shook her head. "I sleep like a rock," she said. "You probably dreamed it." A week passed. Nothing strange. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Then, one evening after work, I came home to find my apartment door cracked open. Inside, everything looked untouched, except my bedroom. The sheets were pulled tight, perfectly made, but on the pillow lay an old-fashioned brass key. No note. I took it to Mrs. Whitmore, asking if she'd left it. She looked at it for a long time before saying softly, "That doesn't belong to me." Then she walked away without another word. That night, I locked my door, stuffed the key in my pocket, and told myself I'd move out by the weekend. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up to something new. Not tapping, not whispering, knocking. Slow, rhythmic knocks coming from the hallway door. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. I sat up in bed, listening, heart pounding. The knocks grew louder, like whoever it was knew I was awake. Finally, I got up, flashlight in one hand, key in the other. When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt freezing, my breath fogged. The knocking stopped. I stood in front of that white door, the one I'd been told never to open. I don't know why I did it, stupidity maybe, but I slid the brass key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The moment I turned it, the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The hinges groaned as I pushed it open. The smell hit first. Rot, damp wood, something metallic. I shined the light inside. The room was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. The wallpaper was peeling, the floorboards warped, and in the center was an old rocking chair facing the wall. It was moving. Just a slow, steady creak, like someone invisible was sitting there, rocking back and forth. Then, a voice. A whisper so close to my ear, it made my knees buckle. "Close the door." I spun around. No one was there. I ran back into my room, slammed my door shut, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By sunrise, I packed my things. When I went upstairs to tell Mrs. Whitmore I was leaving, the kitchen was empty. Her car was gone. I left my key on the counter and drove off, promising myself I'd never go back. 2 weeks later, a detective came to my new place. He said Mrs. Whitmore's niece had found her dead in her bedroom. Natural causes, they thought. But the strange part was this. The police found another door in the basement, behind a wooden panel. Inside that room, they discovered old furniture, dusty photographs, and 2 mummified bodies sitting in rocking chairs. A man and a woman. When the detective showed me a photo, I nearly dropped it. The woman was Mrs. Whitmore. The man beside her, I'd never seen before. The detective said the niece swore her aunt had died years earlier, and that no one had rented the basement since. Before he left, he asked, "Are you sure you lived there last month?" I showed him my lease, my rent receipts, even photos of my room. He frowned, pocketed his notebook, and said quietly, "That house has been empty for over 20 years. Later that night, as I unpacked, I found something wedged in my coat pocket, something I hadn't touched since I fled that basement. The brass key. And scratched into the metal, so faint I almost missed it, were 3 words. We never left.
Don't forget to subscribe for more scary stories. Thank you for watching.